Hey everybody, Assalamu alaikum. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Make sure that you hit the subscribe button and the notify button so you'll know when you're getting new episodes. And we just want to grow this project. I thank you in advance. Without further ado, let's get it rolling. The Shout Out Show. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everybody. I'm your host, Preacher Master, host of the S.O.S, the Shout Out Show. Hope you're having a terrific Tuesday, because I tell everybody, if you're not having a terrific Tuesday, you're going to have to wait a whole another week to try to have another terrific Tuesday. Make it count when you can make it count. That's number one. Number two is, we have some people that come on to the show. If it's your first time come on a Shout Out Show, do us a favor, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. If we earn the like, I have to say that, if we earn the like. And then on top of that, brothers and sisters, whether you come to the show, you stay or not, we appreciate your time, and we hope we gave you a compelling argument to not even have with us, but to go out there and discuss with the rest of the community. And you're officially part of the Shout Out Show, and we have a great show lined up for us. I see people getting in the queue. That's a blessing. And I also want to give a shout out to my Shout Out Show regulars. I know we normally do this program on Saturday, but this person's so special. We're doing it on a Tuesday. That's how powerful it is. We're going to have this brother on a Tuesday. So I want everybody to get comfortable, get your popcorn, get your caffeinated drinks, whatever it is you need, and relax, brothers and sisters, because the brother I'm about to bring on, I met this brother several years ago, like 2005, I believe, and he was working for what I want to say is probably one of the most important civil rights organizations out of the Islamic context, if you will, CAIR-LA. So this brother's been doing, I want to say, like freedom fighter work. I don't know if that's the right term, but that's what we grew up with, freedom fighter work. When I say freedom fighter, it means that you understand the scope of work is not that what you're doing, you're allowing other people to do things, progress further, have mobility, and you be successful. And that's what we need. We need more soldiers. So I said, this guy right here, I'm going to put him on the show. And he is probably the first person we've had on the show who is actually going to talk to a little bit more of the legality, the struggles, the strategies, and facing things like Islamophobia and social justice. So you know how much I talk about it. So you get a break today. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to ask some questions, and in the most poetic way, I'm going to get out of the way, because I feel like this person's been in that struggle just as long as I have, just if not longer, and he's dedicated. And rarely you get to hear people come on the show who are dedicated to some things that they believe. So, brothers and sisters, without further ado, I'm going to welcome my main man, Brother Hussam Ayloush, all the way from California, by way of StreamYard, brothers and sisters. My main man, welcome to the show, beloved.
Pleasure, my honor to be with you on the show, and to be with you in specific, Preach. You know how much I love you, and I appreciate what you do. You are a soldier, brother. You put it in comedy. You probably are way more effective than I'll ever be. But I guess everybody was gifted in a different way, mashallah.
Mashallah, man. Well, first of all, we're happy to have you, man, because it doesn't happen for us that way. Everybody has these crazy schedules. We're dealing with crazy situations, everything from health to social justice to elections. It's almost like a tsunami of the old thing, Newton's law. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. But I always say that, and say, but that's a prelude to it going right. So what's going on, man? CAIR, California. How long have you been there? In fact, let's back up. What's the background before you became the ED of CAIR? Before you went to college, what was it? What were you doing, man? Tell us where you're from. Give us a little narrative of where you're from. We see the man. Where's the young man that grew into this man? I'm shutting up.
Sure. Thank you. And I think everybody has a unique story that is worth listening to, because it shapes who we are. I mean, in whatever direction we take, there's always, I heard some of your story in a couple of your routines, mashallah, and I'm sure there's also more. personally, I was born in a country called Lebanon, Beirut, which was in the news recently because of the explosion that happened at the port there. So I was born there. My parents themselves are of Syrian origin, of Arab, Turkish ethnic background. So I was born there. I was one out of four. We were four brothers to my parents. Well, there was a civil war going on, and as things got really bad, my parents were getting worried about my safety. A lot of my friends, because of the war, were either joining militias or getting killed or whatever it is. So they decided, you know what? Why don't we send him to study abroad? So they decided to send me to the U.S. I have some relatives there, especially an uncle. They said, you know what? We're going to send him there. Not to Bel Air, right? Was sent to Texas. My uncle lives actually in Southern California. I loved engineering, so I did apply for an engineering program, aerospace engineering, at the University of Texas in Austin. I got admitted there. I went to school there, finished my aerospace. I got my aerospace degree. I met my wife there. She's a Texan, Tex-Mex. So we got married, alhamdulillah, there. Eventually moved to California because that's the place you want to be in Southern California if you have an aerospace degree. Worked for an aerospace company and eventually helped start a CAIR chapter. I mean, I've heard about CAIR and I was very impressed. I didn't know any of the people involved, but I loved what they're doing. I loved the mission, the vision, and the professionalism by which they conducted the work. So I got excited, got together with a few brothers and sisters in our area. Very diverse group of people, gender-wise, ethnicity, age, etc. And we formed a chapter for CAIR in the LA area. I served on its first board for a couple of years. That was 1996. Then in 1998, the statewide board of CAIR said, you know what, and the national board said, you know, why don't you take on the position of the executive director for the LA office of CAIR? I told them I had no experience with nonprofit. They said, well, you've been doing well. And I accepted the position, and since then I've been with CAIR. So that's since 1998.
Let me ask you.
And the rest is history.
Let me ask this question. Social justice. It's like you said, you met your wife at college. When did you know, or when did you feel social justice was going to be a very long-term relationship you're going to have?
It's hard. There wasn't like a breaking moment. I'll maybe try to identify a moment, but I would say I grew up in a civil war, as I mentioned, and that makes you. I think most people who grew up in a war tend to be more sensitive. I don't know, but at least the ones I've met tend to be more sensitive toward human suffering because we've all lost loved ones, friends, teachers, neighbors, relatives. So you kind of become more sympathetic, more sensitive towards injustice. I'm a news junkie, so I follow the news around the world. So I get emotionally engaged with any news of injustice anywhere, anywhere from Africa and Nigeria, Middle East, Asia, Europe, South America. And you ask me since I was maybe a teenager, you would ask me, and I will tell you what's going on and what's the turmoil and what is the injustice. And I would always try to cheer people to say, hey, support this group of oppressed people, the underdog. As a kid, that led me to become very focused on human rights. So I'm very driven by human rights, or at least advocates for human rights.
Because it's such a it's the parallel is teaching. The parallel is teaching. I would say in that the work you're going to do, they tell you teach the kids to the best of their level, but to the best of their availability. And what I mean is, you're not going to see, if you're a fourth grade teacher, hopefully you're not going to see the kids back in your classroom the next year. And so it's so episodic. CAIR has had to pivot for a number. I mean, I ran into CAIR 2004 starting when I was trying to start All It Made Me Funny. I went to the office on New Jersey Avenue. I just saw Islamic relations. I didn't know anything about it. I remember taking the press release up there. And I used to remember they used to do CAIR alerts. Remember the CAIR alerts?
Of course. That was the first thing that attracted me to CAIR. They're lower.
So I wasn't alone. But I think, a lot of people should get an understanding because I'm talking about meeting up with CAIR almost 16 years ago. CAIR's been around since 1994. How long has the office been in LA though?
Since, 96 is when we formed the office. So
Okay.
24 years ago.
So, what are some of the challenges you're seeing now? I know with COVID, it's not just raising the necessary and needed funds to go out to fight these legal cases, support people who need assistance, but it's just the whole dynamic of social distancing. You can't get people together, which is a big part of coalition building. You got to be able to get the coalition in the building. How are you guys managing with the social distancing and the issues surrounding COVID?
We're adapting because the reality is that is the world we're in today. We can't sit and wait for things to change back to what they were. Obviously, a lot of our work depends on engaging with people, engaging with the community, the Muslim community and the larger community, our allies, partners, politicians. And there is no shortage of needs of why we need to do that in terms of protesting, lobbying, etc., with all the growing racism, hate, etc. But we have to find ways. We can't visit the mosque, the masajid anymore. I get khutbahs, I get talks. We can't do that. So we're shifting to Zoom. We're shifting to virtual organizing. But the reality is people are also Zoom fatigued. So people are not at the beginning, in the first few months, we used to have hundreds of people joining in. Now dozens and sometimes maybe less. So we have to keep shifting. Organize digitally. If it's not Zoom, make sure you have people's WhatsApp numbers so you can not harass them, but update them, inform them, energize them, mobilize them, text messaging, phone calls, mailers, whatever it takes. Some mosques are reopening now slowly, so there is some little engagement. The reality is the needs have not changed. How we serve those needs is what has changed. So we're still dealing with discrimination. We still get calls from people who are being harassed when they travel at the workplace. People who are harassed by neighbors, landlords, when they go to a supermarket. We still hear about professors or teachers or instructors engaging in misinformation about Islam. So all of that continues to be there. What we needed to do is adjust and adapt. And alhamdulillah, thank God, we have been able to do that. We have a great team nationwide. CAIR is, the strength of CAIR is it's a network. We have 35 offices nationwide. So we build on each other's experience, knowledge, connection. So there's all, everybody is learning new tricks and tips, and they share it with the rest.
Let me ask you a question, because we had a show about this. I was bringing up a subject about a particular show, and I mentioned a movie, and I realized that movie was almost 20 years old. Now, we just talked about how long it's been around. 9/11 is 2001. Next year, it's going to be 20 years since 9/11. And in a way, while the organization's been around, we really put out two generations of kids where this thing seems like normal. It has a place, just like it just has a place in American history. They didn't go through it, but of course they're suffering the ramifications. How do we deal with that? Because it's something that bothers me that, not just Muslim children, but I'm talking about children who may not grow up, or they may grow up on the side where they don't like Muslims. They look at 9/11, it's still the blame game because you have groups now like I want to say groups like the Proud Boys, and QAnon and folks like that, which is, as they say in the game, old poop, different smell. But I think it's interesting because we still have that. And it's almost like if we don't get to that point of addressing it. And I just want you to know, brother, you got some people in the queue giving you shout outs. Brother Najee,
Oh, my beloved brother.
Sister Katina. We give shout outs on the show, man.
Oh, yeah. MashaAllah. These are great people. MashaAllah.
Sister Iger from Indonesia. We gave you shout outs. But I really want you to talk to that because years ago, when I was teaching, we would get fatigued thinking after a year struggling, we would get nervous like, I don't know if we made a dent. Like, I don't know if we changed that child's perspective on education or the parents' perspective on education. Or even if we did a great teacher, we started worrying about, is the kid going to be get another great teacher to continue the process? You know, and I look because, truthfully, we're all getting a little gray in the, we're at that space, we want to be like Marlon Brando in The Guard, man. Just The Godfather.
So I was going to ask you, what was that movie you said that was 20 years old?
The movie was called Bamboozle.
Oh yeah, so you're linking it to some of these groups. Yeah,
and I was talking about, I'll be honest, I was talking about the show Rami. And I was like, again, 15, 20 years later, kids may not understand what that struggle was in 2001. I've said this about comedians. I love our Muslim comedians. I'm like, but when we started, we were in a war. We were in a war. What we did mattered. We didn't worry about being famous. It was like, we're trying to save lives. And now we're comedians like, I'm funny, I'm Muslim, but they don't really know the struggle. And for you to be part of a civil rights organization, I'm like, sometimes I don't think people really understand the true struggle, what you're talking about. You guys are out there in 96 fighting this fight.
And here's the thing. First of all, subhanAllah, how things have changed. I mean, when you did the Allah Made Me Funny tour, there were people who truly believed Muslims could not laugh or did not laugh. I mean, we had to deal with that stereotype. And maybe there were Muslims who could not even imagine themselves laughing. So you had to break through a lot of barriers. Now we have so many, mashallah, great comedians. And a lot of people making the country laugh, not just the Muslim community. So thank you for that, for opening that door. I mean, I would say as Muslims, alhamdulillah, what keeps us going is the faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in God Almighty. We know that we're only responsible for what we can do, and do it sincerely and do it with excellence, and leave the results to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He always delivers on His part. He has promised if we do our part, He will always deliver on His part. So that's what keeps, when you are a teacher, that's what keeps you teaching. Right? My wife is a public school teacher. That's what she continues to teach with all the challenges. Because at the end, we see the dent might not be clear immediately. Some of the results take longer time. So alhamdulillah, we see as Muslims, it's our mandate. Actually, it's our mandate even if we don't get results, even if the results backfire. So our mandate is to stand for truth, for human dignity, to stand for what is right, to speak against injustice, as you know very well, regardless of the results. Let alone that we know that the results will prevail. Basically, goodness will prevail. I mean, here's something that I'll tell you. When I was in high school, my first project that had to do with social justice was about the KKK. And at that time, I had no intention, or not even a thought, that I would ever come to the US. We're talking about over 30 years ago. And when I came to the US, one of the first books that actually shaped my social justice activism in college was the autobiography of Malcolm X. And it was given to me by a non-Muslim white person, by the way. Think about that. And it made me realize that, because it relates to what you're asking about. Who would have imagined someone like Malcolm X, somebody, Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, rahimahullah, Allah grant him mercy and Jannah, inshallah, would shape people's minds until today. Millions of people around the world. When he did what he did, he never thought he would write a book. He never thought he would be the leader. He never thought. But subhanAllah today. So sometimes we do things, trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Think about, think globally, act locally. Find the place where you can make the difference. In yourself first, I tell people, within your family, within your community, and the pieces of the puzzle will come together. We are part of an ummah. We are part of a human race. So we have so many layers we have to care about. But it begins with me. It begins with my own circle. So, alhamdulillah, while 9/11 is a milestone in terms of how we woke up to find hatred and all of that. But let's face it, and you know that preach more than I do. Hatred today is way worse than it was after 9/11, because it took time to brew that hatred and organize it. And we don't, I mean, we have a failed leadership now that actually normalizes racism, Islamophobia, bigotry at a highest level, normalizing this kind of. So what we're dealing with today is, one thing is, I don't want my kids, your kids, our Muslim community to live in the shadow of 9/11. It's a horrific event, but you and I had nothing to do with it. Your kids, my kids, our community had nothing to do with it. Whoever did it is responsible for it, the way any bad act only reflects on the people who commit. What we want our community to feel is to feel proud of their identity. To know that, alhamdulillah, we are the most diverse religious community in the country. We, as American Muslims, alhamdulillah, we're contributing in ways, not with arrogance, but we are contributing at every level, from entertainment to sports to medicine to business to every level. Alhamdulillah, we're there. We're proud of who we are, and we can connect America, our country, to the rest of the world, because we are also connected internationally. So we are a great asset to this country, and it's important for our community to first absorb that, because as Martin taught us, unless we exercise self-pride, then if we don't respect ourselves, how are others going to respect us? So that is where I think it is extremely, everything we do is organizing. Even the laughter you bring to people, it's about giving them the self-confidence that they need. Because everything outside is about pushing them down and making them feel less about themselves. You mock that.
Well, let me interject this. Now we have, I've talked about organizational structure. I talked about things. I've voiced my opinion on some of the protest movements that are out there. I've taken a little heat for Black Lives Matter. And it was only because it's like, literally, you got to read the fine print. Before you get anything, you got to read the fine print. There was a call to action, of course, with the murder of George Floyd. And there was an adjustment, if you will, in terms of attention with that. I called it, 2020 was almost the year of Black suffrage with police brutality. But I caution people to understand that Black suffrage is part of a longer continuum that's built upon justice, built upon opportunity, built upon fairness, built upon equity. And those things missing allow for what we're dealing with now. I really want to know, what's the platform that you guys are doing because CAIR needs to be recognized for stepping just outside of the Muslim community. I think I want to make sure that's clear. Stepping outside of the Muslim community, which is part and parcel of what our faith is. We address oppression everywhere, but it's also the fact that we need to be specifically the religious community, the Jewish community, Christian community, Muslim community. We need to be the protectors of those that do not have protection. When I say don't have protection, I mean they don't have protection in terms of the law. They don't have protection in terms of opportunity, mobility, things like that. So, I'm watching this election on a lot, and we'll get to the election here in a little bit. And not so much who you're going to vote for. I don't want to know that. I really want to talk conceptually about what this election is. But how do we get back to preparing protection for these people? And I'm giving you a teacher model, if you will. How do we teach people, to protect for those who don't have that protection?
I think the first thing is to recognize that we, as American Muslims, as much as we believe it's an act of worship to defend human dignity. This is what Allah and the Holy Quran said. We have bestowed dignity on mankind. But basically, Allah says that. So it's not up to me or you or anybody else to take that human dignity that God has given to people.
Right.
Standing for justice also is a mandate for us. Speaking against injustice, the Prophet saying, when he said, whoever amongst you witnesses injustice, let them change it with their own hand. And if they can't, let them speak against it. And if they can't, basically hate it in their heart. The point is, with all of that, it's important to recognize we are not the only ones who are impacted by injustice, and we're not the only ones who have a mandate to stand for justice. Once we realize that, we understand the other saying of the Prophet, basically, that we have to collaborate. And Allah says it in the Quran also. work with each other, collaborate and partner with each other for justice and for goodness and piety. So once we realized that, and by the way, this was one of the first things that attracted me to CAIR, is that its ability to bring Islamic or Islam's universal values of justice, human dignity, human equality, human brotherhood, and implement them at a larger scale with other communities. So for us, once we recognize that, we need to see like-minded groups, communities, organizations that care about the same issues. This is not these are not exclusive values to Muslims or Islam alone, justice, equality, human dignity. So once we find these groups, we can work together. The second aspect of things is it's also important to understand that what we're going through, and I mentioned that earlier, that what we're going through is not unique. We're not the only community facing injustice, and I think you alluded to that, and that is, I know when I deal with Muslims and I talk to Muslims, sometimes they're thinking, "Oh my God, this is the end of the world." I said, "No, actually, what we're going through here, and I don't want to pander to any community here, but the truth is, what we're going through here today is a fraction of what other communities have had to go through in America, starting with Native Americans, African Americans, Black slaves, immigrants, Latinos, Irish, Italians, Catholics, Mormons, Jews, you name it. And the fact that we have it easy is a direct result of the sacrifices made by these other communities. And these sacrifices continue to happen today. You talked about the Black community and what they're facing. This is, I know it sounds like, now it is almost like a fad, everybody's paying attention, finally. But this has been going on. Racism or anti-Black racism did not begin, right, with Brianna or the murder of Brianna or the murder of George Floyd. The reality is it has been going on. It just started to get attention because of the polarized world we're living in today in America. At least it gives us a chance. So for us, we can learn from that experience, learn from the struggle, their resilience, learn from the resilience of Japanese Americans also, and appreciate the sacrifices that have been made and continue to be made so I can go and vote. The fact that I can vote today as an immigrant Muslim, yes, I've been in the US for 30 plus years, but the fact that I can vote today safely, hopefully, whether by mail or in person if I choose, it is a result of the sacrifices of people who were lynched, killed, murdered from other communities, and specifically the Black community in America. So once we recognize that, first it brings us ease. Misery loves company, right? We know we're not alone. So that it brings us ease. I tell Muslims, take it easy. It's not the end of the world. Other communities have gone through much more horrific times, and they were resilient and they prevailed. Yes, the struggles continue, racism continues, but today we're not where we were 100 or 150 years ago, or even where we were even in the 60s in America. Things will move, and nobody's going to stop that. Not Trump, not the Republicans, not white supremacists, nobody is. If they don't like it, they can pack up and leave. Things are going to change positively in this country.
I just saw breaking news before I came on. Kind of put a little pep in my step. They have decided to unseal the documents from the grand jury information for the Breonna Taylor trial. They decided to unseal it. And yep. I really sat back like, that really doesn't happen a whole lot. Yep. I live my life in fear of, God, I hope I never have to go in front of a grand jury. Because you don't know who they are, what they talk about.
Oh, yeah.
But, it's interesting that it's going to be unsealed by the insistence of the jurors who are saying what's out there in the public is not what actually happened inside. I think, that is a bit of a turn. So let's flip, let's pivot. Let's talk about this election, man. I mean, I don't want to call it the election of another election of the lesser two evils. I have my bones with the current president. I have my bones with Mr. Brother Senator Biden, former VP Biden. That's going back because we go back. History. I watched I needed the Clarence Thomas confirmation.
I watched it,
and I'm like, hey man, you left that sister out to dry. It's real talk. I don't have to say anything about Trump, but I'm going to say something about this process though. Where are we going to get to a much fairer process in terms of what my mentor, Mr. Deck Gregory, said to me. Very loudly, I might add, yelling at me off a joke I made. But he said, you are X amount of years old. You see what, you know everything I went through. He goes, how come we don't have a Black political action committee? Because how come? And then he goes, and you Muslim too? He goes, you have Malcolm, Elijah. He said, you don't have a Muslim political action committee? He says, when are we going to get to the point where the threat, if you will, in the words of Imam Muhammad, if you don't like the way people treat you, change the way you think. You know, when are we going to get to that whole space? Or what's the catalyst for us to get into the space where we change the way we think?
So I think, to be fair to ourselves, you know, it's not an easy thing to bring together a very diverse community with diverse needs and concerns and challenges. Today, the challenges of a Bangladeshi immigrant, you know, American Bangladeshi Muslim, are very different than a Syrian, than a Palestinian American, than an African American, So the reality is we are a community with diverse challenges, economic, political, rights. You know, I can tell you, until 9/11, many Muslims thought they were white.
Yeah.
Really. Like you know, I remember those days, like when we were talking about social justice issues, talk about discrimination, racism. What racism? Look, I'm fine, I'm dandy, everything's fine. 9/11 reminded many people that, many Muslims, that they're not white, even if they had white skin color. I mean, and most did not. Most are brown, let alone Africans, African Americans, you know, etc., etc. So the diversity of issues makes it difficult to bring a community on one agenda. Now things are getting a little bit better because a community does not need one agenda. We can have a diverse agenda too. Just learning how to work together, coming together as a community. I think it begins with us understanding who we are together. I mean, we have to embrace this diversity. We have to embrace and celebrate that, alhamdulillah, that we are, you know, 6 million community in America that has all this beautiful diversity, that we are an ummah of 2 billion people, that's with a B, 2 billion people, ranges all over the world, in every city and every town, every country, alhamdulillah. So this is something to take pride in. And then third thing is learn about the issues. So just because I'm Syrian or Turkish or Arabic background, it doesn't mean I shouldn't know what's happening in Bosnia or what's happening in Somalia, what's happening in America, in our inner cities. Getting to know these things, and you know, most of us can do more than one thing. You know, we can walk and chew gum, right? I can care about my inner city community, and at the same time pray for my brothers and sisters and help bring justice in Palestine. We don't need to pick and choose. So once we get to that, and I see that happening already, alhamdulillah, the political power of the Muslim community is there, and it's being felt at the local level. And in some states at a statewide level. I can tell you in California, where we have 1 million Muslims, alhamdulillah, the Muslim community is very well respected by the rest of the state, you know, by our friends and foes, by the various communities. Because we contribute, we help, we're there for them, and they're here for us. In other cities, it might be a struggle. At a national level, it's not felt there. And we do have a couple of political action committees, a couple of PACs that exist, very active. I know there's the CAIR, California PAC, CAIR PAC, Engage PAC. There's several out there, not at the level where we should be. What I want to make sure that we keep in mind is this election is important. This election is, and I'm not exaggerating if I say, this is probably one of the most important elections that I've witnessed, at least in my 32 years in America. It's going to impact a lot of day-to-day affairs for us, locally, domestically, and of course, nationwide, globally as well. So I want to say who to vote for. Obviously, I work for a non-profit, so I'm not going to tell people who to vote for, but I'm going to tell people, listen, look at the values you stand for, especially as a Muslim. What are the values you care for? And see which of the candidates, you know, this is an Islamic rule, by the way, you know, the lesser of two evil, but I don't like to call people evil, but I would say the Islamic principle is bring the person or vote for the person that will minimize or reduce harm, will bring less harm, and will bring more goodness. That's what it is. Look at every race. And if after all of that, you still can, after looking at both candidates, you still can move to the next candidate. You know, there are a lot of other races. If you're too confused, and I can't see a reason why a person would be confused, but if someone is confused, okay, skip that race, skip that mayor race or president race or Congress race. Go to the other one. There are dozens in your district, and your vote makes a difference. We can't be on the margin, because if we're on the margin, we have no reason, no excuse to complain after that. Plus, political engagement is not just voting. Voting is almost like the cherry on top. Like that's the last thing you do. The political engagement is a little bit about what you talked about, Peach, and that is engaging with politicians, running for office. Change if you don't like how things are, change yourself. Change how you think about yourself. Change how others think about you. By getting engaged, let people see us. At the end of the day, American Muslims are present at every level. Today, every young American today has a couple of classmates who are Muslim. Every American working in the field has a couple of co-workers who are Muslim. And by knowing Muslims, they're knowing how good they are, how positive they are. These people are not going to believe what Fox News says. Yeah, maybe for another couple of years, but that's going to change eventually. In the next few years, American Muslims are going to take the rightful place in, inshallah, being a leading community for justice, not for themselves, but for the rest of the country.
Well, it's interesting because I'm working on a bit of a paper, if you will, talking about Islam, American Islam. And of course, you have the whole scope of indigenous, you have immigrant Muslims. I don't like the term immigrant Muslims. That's all we have until we come up with something better. If anybody does, please put it in the comment box. But I've talked to several people, a couple scholars, as a matter of fact. And one of the things that we've been kicking around, if you will, is that Islam, when we first came together in the 60s and everything like that, there was an impetus for Islam to, for lack of a better word, be colorless. Like Islam in the 60s was colorless, but it wasn't colorless. It was the Islam that promoted, if you will, a quality of life. It promoted family life. And I would say the powers that be wanted an Islam that was colorless, because colorless is almost like toothless for these people. And I want to get your take on that. And I'm bringing it up because I went to the janazah with Muhammad Ali. And one of the feelings when he passed away at the janazah was like, that's our last guy. That's our last guy that we can send out, and everybody kind of bows down to have that reverence. And Muhammad Ali, in his brilliance, he held on to that. He said Islam had color, but it wasn't racism. It was like Islam has color, and we have a definitive story to tell. And I felt like sometimes when we got together, an immigrant brothers, an indigenous brothers, like, you got to listen to the narrative before you got it. I got to tell you about these people I've been dealing with before because if they come up, they're not going to tell you what they've been doing. And so, there's a bit of a revisiting with the George Floyd and things like that. And I thought, that's one of the strategies we really need to work on, because in some of the African American community has been complicit because we all want this thing for Islam to work for all of us, this religious experience to work for all of us. But there's been some give and take, and sometimes gives weren't too great and the takes weren't too great. Because even now, we're trying to rediscover our voice. Like, there's a thing, you can't really talk about racism in America for a lot of African American Muslims because it's not comfortable for other Muslims. No. And the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, his last speech was, I'm like, yeah, but he didn't give it in America. He gave it in America. So, I mean, how do we reverse that? Because now, to talk about racism or African American Muslim, it's like two buckets. It's either anti-Muslim racism, anti-immigrant racism, which are both important, but it doesn't address the agency of being African American Muslim, that 3-level type of deal.
Sure.
Here in the United States, and it's like I tried to do it, Allah made me funny, It worked in some regards, but in some regards, it didn't work. Because I'll give it to you. Something you said in one of your speeches. Now, Hollywood in perception, they want that colorless Muslim. You know, they want that Muslim that goes, everything's okay, but everything ain't okay. We don't have issues that I'm uncomfortable with you. I might have issues in my own community, but I'm not uncomfortable with you. And how do we reverse out of that? Because I'm seeing a lot of that today. I'm not going to say the word I use because I know my mom might be watching. But how do we reverse out of that? Because in some regards, it's made us a little soft, if you will.
Sure.
It's made us a little soft. Like the people don't, you know, they don't, you got to have a little healthy fear. I like that. That was one of the things I liked when I became Muslim. You know, it was the fact I could wear a guy in a bow tie, walk up to the drug dealer and tell him, brother, I love you, we're going to have to leave this corner. And he'd leave. No gun, no police. And that was the narrative. I'm like, how do we get that back? Because it's so important. Because almost 20 years after 9/11, I feel like we've lost a little steam. And you as a civil rights organizer, that means you have to work even harder to gain that ground.
Activate. Yeah.
What do you think about that? I could be talking, but I'm going to shut up.
No, never shut up. Your voice is very inspiring, mashallah. I'll tell you, you touch upon a lot of important. I mean, that was actually my last khutbah, less than a few days ago. That was the topic: strength, building strength as a Muslim community. And I quoted the hadith, the saying of our beloved Prophet, peace be upon him, which he said in Arabic. He said, "Al-mu'min al-qawiyyu khayrun wa ahabbu ila Allah min al-mu'min al-da'if, wa fi kullin khayr." He said in an authentic hadith, the strong believer is better and more beloved to Allah than the weak believer, although there is goodness in all. He said, all the believers. The point is, Islam is not a religion that promotes weakness. It promotes humility and humbleness towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and fellow mankind. But I reminded people in the khutbah, in my sermon, I said, what brought the African American community back to Islam in the early days here was actually looking at people like the nation of Islam, like Malcolm X, like Muhammad Ali, right? The fruit of Islam. You know, when you watch that, it brought you pride, because here you are an oppressed community, and suddenly you see a group of people that bring you pride. Same thing in the early days of Islam. When people saw somebody like Umar ibn Khattab, Abu Bakr, Bilal, people like Ali, these are the people who stood up. Bilal, a slave, right? Being tortured, being chained, and yet he insisted on his belief. It made others look and say, wow, what is this religion that gives you such strength to stand up for what you believe in? And I think you're absolutely right. After 9/11, there was a shift in the community because of the fear that existed. Nobody wanted to be branded as, too aggressive. No one wanted to be linked to this aggressiveness, quote unquote. But there's a whole difference. We can all, and alhamdulillah, we all reject terrorism and targeting innocent people. But it doesn't mean I'm gonna be weak about my rights and the right to oppress people here and abroad. So you're absolutely right, but that's gonna take us doing some soul searching. One is, it is generational. I can tell you, it happened within the older generation, especially the early immigrants. They were easy to shift. The younger generation is ready to take on, the torch again. We need to remind them that Islam is about strength not for oppression, strength for justice. When we listen to the speeches, subhanAllah, when I listen to the speeches and the talks of Malcolm X today, it's almost like somebody's talking out. It's very relevant, and it's also focusing. It's not focusing about the law. It's focusing on building the self-pride, because a community with no self-pride, no self-dignity cannot do anything. It will be manipulated, it will be humiliated. So building on that, this is also the Quran. This is the Hadith of the Prophet. This is exactly what we need to do. We need to remind our community that we're a community with a history, a great history. We're a community with mandate. Again, I don't say that in an arrogant way, but Allah says in the Quran, basically talking to the believers, you are the best of nations. You are the best of nations sent or made available for mankind. Why? You enjoin the good and you forbid the evil, and you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is our mandate. We need to remind people, uh, don't be afraid. Allah is in charge of things. Do things wisely. Do things within the law. Do things, rock the boat. It's okay to rock the boat. We didn't get the freedoms we have today by being submissive, by the early generation being submissive. It's by shaking up the ground a little bit. It needed those voices that reminded the community of its responsibility, but it also reminded others that you can't humiliate or you can't oppress that community. Today, there's no shortage of faith around the world and within the Muslim community. What we need is some strength. And when we talk about strength, it's political strength. It's about educational strength, financial strength. It's about knowing who we are, building alliances. This is a strength. So we should not shy away. I know in the faith communities in general, and in Muslims, among Muslims in particular, sometimes we shy away from building strength because we feel like, we don't want to intimidate people. That's not our goal. It's our goal is we need that strong of a shield so we can shield and protect as many oppressed people as possible.
Well, we got a couple minutes here, so I wanna dip into this discussion of this election. Let me start out by saying this is one of the weirdest elections I've ever been a part of. Meaning, I've literally called Donald Trump Donald McCarthy.
Worse, actually, much worse.
For the divisiveness. How does this thing end, though? Because I've watched somebody who, when somebody says, I'm willing to do whatever I have to do to hold on, but what they won't do is work hard and be forthright and trustworthy and honest. Yeah. I get nervous. I step back. I said, that's a person that's on a train wreck. But this train wreck has a lot of people on that train. Election night, what are we looking at? What's your prediction?
Yeah, I mean, if anybody knew, they can become a millionaire, obviously. And I predicted and I was wrong last election, so I'm not gonna. But I would say things seem to, obviously, I take CAIR's hat off as a non-profit. We can't endorse any candidate. So I'm speaking more on my own behalf.
Let me clarify. Is there going to be, win or lose? Do you foresee a peaceful transition of power?
Yeah, I think it's all threats now. I mean, because I think democracy is very solid and deeply rooted in our country, despite all the flaws. I don't think anyone can undermine it. But I can tell you, if we take 4 more years, that could be undermined. That we're heading towards fascism.
Yes,
we're not there yet. I think we have enough checks and balances from media, from politicians, even from Republicans themselves. I think a lot of Republicans would not allow, and let's give them credit. A lot of Republicans are as worried as we are about the future of the country. I lived through a time, as I said, I've been in this country for 32 years now. I've lived through times when people can disagree within the same family. You can be a Democrat, a Republican, an independent, and still have a civil disagreement and discussion, and still respect each other, and have a large common ground. Today, there's a level of polarization that this president has brought into this country. Normalization of hate, demonization of any opposing view. That is very unhealthy. I mean, you can be a Democrat or Republican, I don't care at this point, but let's bring back some kind of civility, some humanity. I mean, watching the debate broke my heart. I mean, I felt bad for Biden because, the guy resisted. At the end, he said, can you shut up? Because, the amount of bullying coming from Trump was just unbelievable.
Because what I believe is that the next debate should be a pay-per-view event, and the moderator should be replaced by a referee. It should be held in the octagon, and they should be allowed to beat the snot out of one another. And we take the money from the pay-per-view, and we have our own stimulus package.
My wife is a public school teacher. She believes the referee or the moderator should be a public school teacher because they're used to dealing with kids. in this case.
Yeah, turn on the man babies. Hey,
Exactly.
tell us, before we get out of here, tell me a little bit what's going on with CAIR. What's upcoming for you guys?
We are continuing with our efforts. Election is a very important season for us. So nationwide, we're conducting candidate forums, we're preparing voter guides, raising awareness about the propositions at a state level, local levels, the measure, educating about the candidates to make sure that we have an informed Muslim community so they can vote. We just finished, we closed with a almost 6 month work, a little bit more than that, of census, encouraging American Muslims to register for the census. Every year we hold an annual banquet, for which we've been very honored to have you as a guest many times.
I appreciate it. I'm going to be back one day.
We want to have you back, believe me.
So when is the banquet? Because it's
this year,
make sure we get it out, get that info out early.
So this year is not going to be a physical one in person. It's going to be a virtual one, statewide. We're going to do on November 7th. The information is present on our website, ca.cair.com. Please register. We have a great lineup of guests. Imam Suhaib, Sister Aisha Prime, Sheikh Aisha Prime, Sister Linda Sarsour, and others will be there, inshallah. So we hope people will get there. It's not as fun as being there in person, but inshallah we'll try to make it up. Most importantly, we want people to realize life is not going to end after election. So continue to be positive, continue to be engaged, get to know your community, get to know your local offices of CAIR or other organizations. Be active. If half of us are active, we'll make a difference. Today we don't have that many. Inshallah, we want to get more than that, but at least let's start with that, inshallah.
My brother, thank you so much for coming on the show. Appreciate you. Anything I could do for you. My platform is your platform. And please tell everybody in the field, I thank you. Continue to work hard. For all my people in the comment boxes, thank you for coming on. We appreciate you, man. We want to have you back soon. If there's anything you need from me, man, this is more than you coming on my show. We're boys, we're homies. So with that, man, I want you to have a blessed day. The rest of a blessed day, man. And please keep up the good fight. Inshallah.
Thank you, and thank you for having me on your show. Thank you to you and your team and all the viewers. May Allah bless you and bless your efforts, and I look forward to seeing you soon, inshallah.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Hey everybody, this is your brother Preacher Moss. Listen, I hope that you enjoyed your shout out show experience. We'll be back with the next show, the next shout out show. A simple ask before you go, please help your brother out. Click that subscribe button, click that notify button, and I'll see you again on this side of the microphone. You probably wonder what that smell is. That's me. I smell good. And the reason I smell good is because I use oils from Tarif Al-Tar. So I'm not saying you can't smell good. I'm not even saying you stink. I'm saying you have the opportunity to smell exquisite. Check out TarifAltar.com for some of the best oils and scents in town.